So when I come here every day, or every day that I come here, I usually drive on 94, get off on Snelling. So you're getting off on an exit ramp, and as you've probably seen around our city, for a long time you usually see somebody with a sign at an exit ramp, trying to get some change, some money, some help, stuff like that. And if you go to the same place again and again, like I tend to do, people get familiar. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that one, that person, that man or woman from last time. In fact, there was a guy that used to take up a spot outside a coffee shop where I used to work. Because I was on foot, I would get to talk to him more, and I was on a first-name basis with him. But we'll see that this is not something that's just from our time. It's from every time. And we'll see how Jesus and his disciples interact with such a person in today's 5-minute devotional from John chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. So Jesus and his disciples are walking along, and they see a guy, familiar guy. He's like, oh, there's that blind guy that's always there. Now, in the ancient world, it would have been a real hardship to have a disability. And all of the things that were considered hardships, the thought of the time is whatever hardship you had must be the result of somebody's sin. Which you can understand. I mean, a lot of the things that go wrong in life might be because of choices that were made. Really common example might be driving while drunk. Bad stuff could happen. Yeah, that would be because of sin. But that idea was extrapolated to all kinds of difficulties in life. So you have a person who has their difficulties that they were born blind. It was like, well, what? If we assume that this is somehow somebody's sin fault, but he was born that way, it's like this theological question that his disciples are posing to him. Well, could it have been him? I mean, how could he have sinned before he was born, or was it his parents that sinned? Because we see some Old Testament stuff where parent sins affect next generations. Like, what is it, Rabbi? What is it, Teacher Jesus? Why is this guy having this difficulty in life? And Jesus, didn't do what they expected him. He didn't take the person that was in front of them that they were talking about as just like a theoretical example of an interesting philosophical and theological problem. Jesus said, well, no, you guys have it wrong. It's not about sin. This guy was born to glorify God. Here, let me show you. And he does some weird stuff, which we'll get to in another one, where he spits and makes mud with his spit and puts it on the guy's eyes. Okay? There's a reason for that. Right now, just accept it. And it says, go wash it off, and he washes it off, and he can see. This will have many implications for next 5-minute devotionals. But for now, I want you to see that for Jesus, this wasn't an example of an idea. This was a person. And this was a person whose life, even though from the disciples' perspective, he was just the guy who was always there, who was begging. For Jesus, he wasn't an example. He was an individual person whose life was meant to glorify God. Take that as something to hang on to. But you might be thinking, well, that's not how we think about people with disabilities. We don't think generally that it's from some sin that people have different abilities. That's true. But is there anybody in society that we do automatically have this urge to say, well, they have difficulties. They have difficulties. It must be because of some sin that they or somebody else committed. How about people who are experiencing poverty or homelessness? Is the first instinct to be, well, who sinned? You know, what kind of poor management of money or resources or whatever led to this? Well, maybe it's not that they or anyone sinned, but that the world is broken. And there are other examples too. So whenever we see someone else's life situation, I'd say, you know, maybe examine if your first response is to see whose fault it is. And realize that everyone's life, like this guy's, was actually meant to glorify God.